17 minutes before the top of the hour. When death occurs in the family, it's hard, but what might just make it harder is having to deal with the deceased's estate. Now, have you ever wondered about the importance of having a will, or have you actually prepared your family about the contents of your will? That's a good question, I suppose, and the question arises in the light of yesterday, the unveiling of Nelson Mandela's will. Let's speak to a legal expert on the deceased estate, Evert Van Eeden. He joins us from our Pretoria studios. Welcome to Morning Live. It's good to have you on the program.
Good morning.
Before we get into the hard and burning issues about the will, how important is it for one to have their will constantly up to date and prepared?
Well, when a person passes away, there are a few questions that have to be attended to, and the first one is what happens to the estate of that person. And secondly, not only do you have to determine what happens to the estate and what the estate is, but you've also got to determine where the estate goes, and you've got to decide who is going to be responsible for the administration of that estate. If you have a will, then you basically determine those issues yourself. You decide essentially who is to be beneficiaries under the will and who not. You can make provision for the appointment of an executor. You decide who gets what amounts of the estate, and you basically have control over it.
Yeah.
However, if you do not have a will, then there is a very useful set of rules which determines how the estate is to be administered, and that we call the law of interstate succession. It's a good set of rules and a very important set of rules, and it serves as a backup or a default for what happens to your estate if you have not determined by means of a will what should happen to your estate. The difficulty, however, is that the contents of the rules may not necessarily coincide with what you would have wanted if you had taken the trouble to finalize an estate and to deal with a will to have the estate administered. Then there's a second problem, and that is that the rules may tell us how to go about to identify the people who will be beneficiaries under the will. However, the information or the evidence is not necessarily there, and there may be disputes and arguments about who falls under the rules of the law of interstate succession. And that generates one major issue, and that is delay. Small uncertainties can create large delays.
So
that will have an
well, I mean, what I'm gathering from you, it is vital. You need to have this will in place, because I think a lot of people are under the impression that it's only the wealthy that need to have a will. But from what you're saying, that's not the case. Everybody should have their will.
Absolutely. It is so important to have it attended to. In the absence thereof, there can be an impact on the spouse, on the children. It's difficult to plan for the next generation, and you can end up, because of delays in the interstate legal process, you can end up with delays that actually have the effect of sterilizing funds which are intended for the family. There's probably also a wider impact, and that is if there are many people who are subject to that, call it a disability, then it starts to become a major social problem. So go to your attorney, go to your accountant, have a will attended to. It's not a complicated process, it's not a difficult process, have it attended to.
Now, just in terms of the contents of one's will, can you talk about it before with a family? Is it something that you advise, or not really? Is that something that is your private wishes?
Well, it's certainly, as you indicate, it is a private issue, and it is for the testator, the person who draws the will, to decide how far he wishes to take that privacy. But first of all, you're absolutely correct in identifying privacy as a top priority in this concern, and then the testator must decide. He can take into consideration issues such as impacts on relationships. How will it affect inter-family relationships. It may also have some impact outside of the family. So one consideration to take into account is how will if I disclose issues of my will, how will it affect relationships around the family? Secondly, you must take into consideration the impact that information about the contents of the will may have on incentives to work hard or not to work hard for people who can potentially take under the will. And then probably a third consideration to take into account is to consider that once you've disclosed what you intend to do in your will and you then want to change it, again, that can have a further effect on family relationships. So there are good considerations why you should treat the privacy around your will with a due amount of respect.
All right, let's leave it there for this morning. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for giving us a little bit of advice on this issue that I think a lot of people are just too scared to speak about. But it's a reality. Unfortunately, you know the old saying, there are two realities in life, that's taxes and death. So I think you need to have that will in place because it's going to happen. That was Evert Van Eeden. He's joining us. He's a legal expert and he was in our Pretoria studios. All right.